Music, Quarter 1, Module 3, Music, Medieval, Renaissance, and Baroque Period. Over the years, the relationship between music, the arts, and literature has always focused on their similarities and differences. Many writers considered music as the highest of the arts in relation to painting and literature, since it remains in the realm of imagination and is not tied to a specific represented reality. The music of the medieval period, just like any other kind of music, expressed feelings that were difficult to put into words and words that remained unspoken. Same on how other artists expressed their emotions to their art forms. The Renaissance human spirit, being born again, shaped not only musical, artistic, and literary production, but also laid the spiritual, intellectual, and moral foundation of life well into the 19th century. The Baroque period saw the creation of tonality. During the period, composers and performers used more elaborate musical ornamentation, made changes in musical notation, and developed new instrumental playing techniques. Baroque music expanded the size, range, and complexity of instrumental performance, and also established opera, cantata, oratorio, concerto, and sonata as musical genres. Many musical terms and concepts from this era are still in use today. Art forms related to medieval, Renaissance, and Baroque music. Medieval liturgical drama. During this time of liturgical musical drama unfolds throughout Europe, Guillaume de Quentin was one of the well-known troubadours with most themes centered around chivalry and courtly love. The lifetime of Hildegard von Bingen, a highly regarded abbess who was conferred the title of Doctor of the Church by Pope Benedict XVI. One of her works as a composer, the Ordo Virtutum, is an early example of liturgical drama and arguably the oldest surviving morality play. Medieval poetry. This period is the age of the Gauliards. The Gauliards were a group of clergy who wrote satirical Latin poetry to mock the church. Some known Gauliards were Peter of Blois and Walter of Chatillon. Medieval literature. This period was the birth of Minnesang, which were lyric and songwriting in Germany, much like the troubadour tradition of France. Minne singers mainly sang of courtly love, and some known Minne singers were Henrik von Wildig, Wolfram von Eschenbach, and Hartmann von Aue. The spread of Geisler-Lieder or flagellant songs. The practice of flagellation was practiced by people whipping themselves with various instruments as a way to repent to God with hopes of ending the disease and wars of the time. Geisler-Lieder music was simple and closely related to folk songs. Medieval architecture. The flowering of the Notre Dame School of Polyphony from around 1150 to 1250 corresponded to the equally impressive achievements in Gothic architecture. The music of this period is called the Parisian School or Parisian Organum and represents the beginning of what is conventionally known as Ars Antiqua. Medieval poetry. The beginning of the Ars Nova is one of the few clean chronological divisions in medieval music, since it corresponds to the publication of the Roman de Foucault, a huge compilation of poetry and music. Renaissance painting. One of the most significant achievements of the time in music and painting is the transition from successive to simultaneous composition. Painting and music found their equivalent in the literature of the time, where protagonists find psychological depth. Word painting was utilized by Renaissance composers to represent poetic images musically. For example, an ascending melodic line would portray the text Ascension to Heaven, or a series of rapid notes would represent running.
The beginning of the 16th century ushered in subtle but monumental changes in music. With the advent of music printing, music was for the first time readily and cheaply available. Music became a pastime for more than just the elite, and this is reflected in songs that express our common humanity in language that is understandable to all. The Italian madrigal is a perfect example of the new 16th century style. Petrarch's poetry in particular was an inspiration to composers who sought to imitate the text in their musical setting. Her savage, bitter heart and cruel will, beneath a sweet, humble, angelic form, however much they retain their severity, gain slight honor from me as their prize. Examples of word painting abound in Adrian Villard's setting of Petrarch's poem, Aspro Cuore Selvaggio. The opening line, her savage bitter heart, utilizes harsh parallel major intervals and contrasts with the mellower consonants expressed in the minor intervals, setting up a sweet, humble, angelic form. The line, when it is shining day, ascends toward a C major chord, contrasting with when it is dark night, which descends into an A minor chord. To set the line, I weep at every hour, Villard introduces the motive down a third, up by step, and then uses it in imitation 16 times. Earlier in the Renaissance, vocal ranges had been expanded by the Franco-Flemish composers. With wider ranges available, there was less voice crossing, and the individual voices became more homogeneous, without one particular voice standing out as the obvious melodic voice. Since the music of the madrigal was composed specifically to set the text, the piece is through composed rather than strophic, and this is another common characteristic of Italian madrigals. As you listen to this piece, pay attention to Villard's use of word painting. The equal importance of all the voices and the through composed text setting.
Renaissance theater arts. From the Renaissance, the day began to be measured in 24-hour periods, which, when applied to theater and opera, becomes the famous 24-hour rule. It stipulated that all action on stage has to be started and completed within 24 hours, a rule which continued until the 19th century and was broken only by the Romantic time period. Renaissance technology. The invention of the printing press in 1439 made it cheaper and easier to distribute music and music theory texts on a wider geographical scale and to more people. Prior to the invention of printing, written music and music theory texts had to be hand-copied, a time-consuming and expensive process. Renaissance opera. A dramatic stage genre in which singers are accompanied by instruments arose at this time in Florence. Opera was developed as a deliberate attempt to resurrect the music of ancient Greece. Baroque sculptures. Art. Contrast in light from dark. Music. The differences between loud and soft, fast and slow, complicated textures or polyphony, and single melodies, solo and ensembles, and different instruments and timbres, or how instruments sound, all contribute to the diverse contrast and drama of Baroque music. The images of the sculptures of David by Donatello and Michelangelo and Bernini below show the progression from the quietness of the classical Renaissance to the emotional characteristics of the Baroque. Baroque opera. Art, realistic perfection. Music, Vivaldi's Concerto Four Seasons, as well as Bach's cantatas and Rameau's operas, demonstrate how their music portrayed realistic images, stories, and scriptures and brought them to life with sound. Art, action, and movement. Music, currents of driving rhythms and or soulful melodies adorned with ornaments color every Baroque composition. Art, compositions are often asymmetrical. Music forms of the Baroque era grew directly from the dramatic nature of the music, such as the opera, the oratorio, and the cantata. These elaborate forms were elongated with a wide range in mood, tempo, texture, rhythm, dynamics, and ornaments. Art has strong emotional content. Baroque composers believed music was their tool for communicating emotions, which gave rise to the opera during this time period. Baroque painting. Art, subject matter including religious subjects as well, but also in the Baroque, people of all classes were painted in more realistic settings. Note that the famous painting Girl with a Pearl Earring by Vermeer stands out not only because of its beauty, but the subject is a peasant and not one of royalty. Music. Most composers earned a living writing music for royalty and or the church. Many of the compositions of the time were dictated by the demands of those who could pay.